Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spiritual as Fuck or Whatever podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Roxanne.
Today we're going to be talking about shame. 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 Remember that Game of Thrones?
Yes.
When she went down there? That's what that's from.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what that's from.
So what about shame?
We can't just not say what was just happening though.
I can't stop laughing. Don't start laughing again.
Okay.
Okay.
So, what do we say about shame? I think just name it that we have been recording in here for several hours.
It's been a long day.
And because
I'm gonna take a drink of water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to get some more episodes out because Joe's going on retreat. And then I will be going on writer's residency. So we're a little slap happy.
A giggle attack for sure.
Yes. But we have serious topics to talk about. But first, I burped. We need to talk about poopery. If you have been following us, you know that poopery is our number one dream.
Roxanne has reached new levels.
I have, because we got free poopery. And we just want to say how much we love poopery and their giant inflatable poop emoji. This one, they have poop with antlers on it. So if you're looking for a holiday gift, go in for the poopery.
This one's, I think it's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yes, I think
is that one too?
but mine's in green, so it doesn't look right. Anyway, poopery makes it so your poop don't stink, but you still can poop and be free. Don't avoid
do your
the poop.
loved ones a favor.
Yes. Okay. I am obsessed with it, actually. I have the poopery for my bag, my purse, so I can carry poopery wherever I go. She's been spraying it around. I have, actually.
No one's
pooped. It's my new perfume.
No one's pooped.
It's my new perfume. I am. I'm going to be known as smelling like poopery because I love it so much. It's fresh. It's clean.
Fresh and clean.
All right. Let's talk about shame, Joe. Do you want me to start? Or do you want to start? You keep wanting to talk about it.
No.
The difference between shame and regret, the different shame and guilt. What are we talking about?
What is shame? What is shame?
So for me,
yes,
the definition that I like, and I don't know where I got it, but I did not make it up, is that shame is I am bad.
Right.
And guilt is I did something bad.
Right.
And for me, I consider shame as evil.
Yeah.
Shame is the devil.
Yeah.
If there's any evil in the world, shame is a part of it.
Is there any way that you should be ashamed of something?
I mean, I think that we're looking at language, though. I mean, that's language. Yeah. So it's like, of course, like you can say ashamed, and it's not the same as harboring shame.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Have you dealt with shame before? And how has that worked for you? And how did you get out of the shame spiral?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if for me, I don't know if I'm ever out. We've talked about on the podcast that I have struggled with self-loathing and intense self-hatred. And that for me is shame. And that shame that I am not right, that there's something innately wrong with me, that I may be bad, that, and that giving over importance to my mistakes. Mm-hmm. So I've struggled with it a lot. And then that question of like, even when I do well and do good and focus on being so good, that I have in the past really struggled with this deep sense of just I am wrong and bad and not good enough, not anything enough. What about you, Joe? You love yourself.
I just had a thought, but
what?
No.
Joe,
it was the giggle thought from our giggle fucking. I don't want to get into that. So shame shows up for me, and where it was most has been most apparent in my life. Same with all that, like the self-loathing, not good enough, all those kind of things, but where it's very clear where I was ashamed of being a drug addict. I was ashamed of using heroin, being a junkie. A lot of shame, and a lot of shame around just living that lifestyle. And I not until later in my practice, pretty recently, did realize that wasn't doing me any good.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't a bad person, because I didn't really know what shame, like you said, the definition is like shame is you're something bad. And until I really started practicing, and like that's not who I was, or that's something that was happening. And honestly, using drugs was, in a sense, if I can get to the root of it, was just to ease some pain. Just to ease some kind of discomfort in my life. And where it led was all kinds of unskilled behavior. So there's some guilt around that. Mm-hmm. But more even the language of guilt, I like to even go to regret. There's a little bit of regret. And I think regret is okay. There can be a healthy sense of regret. Regret I can learn from.
Yes. I
can learn from, like, okay, that feeling, that regret feeling, that's because there's some unskilled behaviors around my addiction. Mm-hmm. But I'm not a bad person, because that's not who I truly am. Pretty much I am a caring, loving person. And even towards myself, even turning towards drugs was kind of a compassionate act in a way.
Yeah.
So the shame came up a lot around my addiction. I didn't want to let anybody know truly what, and it led me to hiding my addiction when I was in addiction, or when I was on a run or whatever. So there was nothing good coming from it. But the regret part, I could learn from. The shame, I couldn't. It just got me down into like the shame spiral. I'm not good enough, so it got me into the fuck it's. Fuck it anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm broken, So I had to, every time I had that feeling, like really come out of like, okay, there's some guilt, but really, can I just land in some regret? So that was how I practiced with it. Mm-hmm. This in my practice. And
leaning into regret
a little bit more. And I think it's healthy for us to have a little, especially when there's a healthy sense of regret, there really is.
Yeah. So when we look at shame, though, like where it comes from, and I have an idea.
I have a little idea too
about shame. And what's your idea about where shame comes from?
Can I hear yours first? I think it's conditioning. I think it's conditioning from whether it's our caregivers, or just society in general, what we're supposed to be like, what we're not supposed to be like. Mm-hmm. So what a good person is, I think it stems a lot around that.
Definitely, I agree. I think then that, like, where does that come from? Because I feel like that when we look at shame, most people with trauma have issues with shame, because it's almost the only way to find power in a situation where you're disempowered is to find a reason why it was your fault. And then I think that is ancestral. I mean, it's been proven that with, that our DNA changes. DNA, and that I think that it is definitely spread through families, both behaviorally and innately and implicitly. And so when I started working on shame, I definitely worked on myself. I started with taking inventory, starting making amends for my, the places that I was wrong and the way it harmed people. I started with like doing esteemable acts and making sure like that have something to go like, okay, I made lists of this is what good people do. Cause I didn't know. And so, I had lists of like they, if you pee on a toilet seat, they wipe it off. They pick up their they pick up their popcorn at movies. Like, they don't leave a mess. They like just basic things. They give money to people who play accordions on the street. They, like, they don't leave, they don't litter.
So kind of like a moral standard.
It was just me making lists to start there, to go. I know how to do. I knew about love because I had, these brothers, but I wanted to have, when people are like, you're not bad. And I'd be like, I've been really bad, And so to start there and then to look at, like, I went through and made amends for things I'd stolen and ways I'd harmed people and people I'd been selfish with and blah, blah, blah. But then I got onto some ground, like, some stable ground about, like, I can trust myself to not do these bad things, but then starting to unravel these, like, and I'm very visual. So I think of that deep shame as like these really tight black ribbons around my core that are like strangling me. And I went to start dealing with those. And of course I went to how I was raised and what I was told about who I am and the way I was treated and all that. And then I went and looked at my mom and I'm like, of course she didn't do that just to be like, yeah, I'm going to have these kids and be mean to them. But then looking at ancestrally and going like, trauma is it. Oh, Joe. Shame, Joe. Shame. Is that your iPad?
It's the iPad because I was checking that shit.
Oh, you think it's going to happen again?
Probably. Want me to grab it?
No, you're still a good person. Underneath.
So are you talking about systemic trauma kind of thing?
Well, I think shame just gets handed down. It gets handed down. Yeah. And so starting to deal with just what I knew about my family. Do you
it comes from a moral compass kind of thing that's been handed down kind of thing?
I don't think it's a moral compass.
You don't think it's a moral compass?
I think it's this...
Like a standard?
I think that getting to the core of who we are, and it weasels in and says you are bad, and that when you pass that on to your kids, and that there's a model. I'm really horrible at remembering where everything comes from, but I'm just going to consistently say when it's not mine, I'll say it. There's this model about stressors that a human being comes into this world and they have this core, and the core is loving and trusting and interconnected, and actually has the healthy kind of pride of themselves and all these things that is a whole person. And then the external, if you envision it in circles, the small circle is that wholeness, and the external is a layer of self, and then there's this outer realm that a stressor can come into, but then there's all these stress relieving tools: yawning, stretching, crying, shaking, yelling, all the ways that we dissipate stress. And that if a stressor comes in and it is too much to be dissipated, it can go into and fracture the core. You're not allowed to if you're not allowed to laugh, if you're not allowed to shake, if you're not allowed to do those things, then that fractures your core. And so I think that when we have generation upon generation of either stressors that were too much to be deflected through those stress management tools, or they are repeatedly not allowed to use them, which on one side, there's like colonial white culture that is performing all these bad things, and then telling, and then puritanically, the Puritans like telling us we can't yawn and we can't shake and we can't, you better sit, a stiff upper lip, that we get this DNA that is filled with with this not wholeness, this brokenness, this I am bad, and and that's I think and then also with stressors of like when I look at different sides of my family, and then I'm like, there's like horrible genocide that there's on both sides, to where when we enact negative things, So like in my family, there's the Trail of Tears, and on both there's the people who enacted and like enforced this horrific genocide. There's the white people, and then there's the native people, and then there's, you know, the people that were my grandparents who are holding both sides of that genetically.
Yeah.
When they enact things that they know, like when we enact things that we know are horrible, it goes into our core if we're not like getting it out, if we're not figuring out how to address it. And so I know that gets real deep, but I think ancestral healing is, maybe we'll do a whole podcast on ancestral healing.
Because you're tapping into, like, we're losing our fucking primal instinct to fucking shake, yawn because of conditions.
Well, and that it takes more at times to address this core shame than just our lives.
Sure.
And my mom did this to me, because when I started dealing with that, I was like, I actually need to deal with the history of this. And then it made a huge difference when I started looking at what's going on with the DNA, what's going on with how each of these people were allowed to be whole or not be whole.
Yeah.
And so then for myself, it's addressing that. What, you know, do I allow myself those stress management techniques now, as well as discerning, which we're not really using that word that much anymore because we use it so
I
much.
like it.
But just
so
like
discerning is just clarity. There's clarity.
But I think of it like like if you think about, there's this giant mess, and that when we start working on ourselves, what we have and what it feels like we have is just this big pile of all the wrongs I've done and all the wrongs other people have done. And it is just this, it looks like a huge dump heap. And that's ourself. Yeah. And we just go, all I am is this big dump heap. And then when you go in to start working on yourself, we think we're going to go in and like clean it all up, but there's no place to put it until we like build a garage around it. And that takes help, and that takes structure, which you're literally creating a structure, how do I do good? How do I live my life? Do I stop traumatizing myself through substance abuse? Do I stop traumatizing others? Do I stop doing these things that add to that heap? And that creates this ego structure, a positive ego. This is what good is. And then you start picking things up out of that pile and go, you just having that thing of looking at it and going, you know, okay, do I have regret? How can I handle this? Do I have, okay, this is something this is something where it's like, I've had so many things that I had shame, like deep shame over. And then when I really picked it up and looked at it, I was like, oh, that doesn't deserve shame. Yeah. That's just like, And then you find a place in your garage for it, which is an integration. You integrate into yourself. And so it's not like avoid the dump heap or get rid of everything. It's a lifelong process, but the more you get things like, you know, put away and integrated into ourselves, or just going like, this had way more energy than it needed, and all I needed to do was look at it, but we can't deal with it all in one go. No.
It seems like you say garage. I think I see mine as a bunch of different storage sheds. Like, okay, I need a bigger storage shed for this shit. Yeah. Than over here. Yeah. And by doing that, then you get to that core again. You feel?
Well, yeah, because
but you still there's still that stuff that's there. We're not getting rid of again. It's there, but it's not defining us moving forward, where it could have before if we're in that shame from it all. Yeah. And then we can move forward making mistakes without it being this like we can see the regret a little bit more.
Yeah.
And just chalking up to, this is just fucking, I'm broken. This is, of course I'm doing this again kind of shit.
Yeah. And you can see that with how people deal with making mistakes. Like you know, when somebody hasn't done their work or is in the midst of doing their work, and then there's this like, they make a mistake and then you call them on it and then they go like, what do you want? You know, like, oh fine, everything is bad. I have to, you know, and that being able to take responsibility for your part, that has to come with not being driven by this thing of like, I am just not good.
Right.
And so, but I don't think it comes from like just repeatedly saying, gosh darn it, people like me all the time.
No,
like,
it's not affirmation.
It's
looking
not
in the mirror.
just that. But
No.
there is a part where I do have
learn-
to focus in on, like, I'm worthy of love.
Yes,
My
and
love.
there's that stuff still, and we can learn from when we have that healthy sense of regret. There's a learning. I feel like when I'm working with people in recovery, early recovery, a lot of people are coming in from relapse, and there's such a shame of relapse.
Yes.
The shame of relapse kept me out for a long fucking time, and I tell them, I go, "There's no shame in your relapse game. You're fucking here. That's huge. What did you learn? What did you learn? You know, it's like, you made it back. Let's fucking kill it. We don't have to relapse, hopefully, you know, but to have that shame, that could fucking lead to more. What do we learn from it?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a resiliency when we can start doing that more than like, a bounce back when we do make mistakes. Because we still, like you said, moving forward, I still fuck up. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It's like, what's to be learned from that? My son said it one time. I think I brought it in before. I don't know where he learned it, but he's like, because I apologized a lot. I apologized to him a lot. I think I did say that, but anyway, I'll say it again. It's, you know, I make mistakes, you know, and he's like, he said, it's only a mistake, Dad, if you don't learn from it. I'm like, damn, it's fucking deep. It really is, you know, this is not a mistake. It's a learning experience, you know?
Yeah. And it's not to say that you don't show up and go, that was unskillful of me.
Exactly.
And
For
I'm
sure.
going to, and to face how we affect others. Because I think that's what happens with families, is that, you know, people don't want to, I feel like my story, when I start telling people what my mom and my stepdad did, they are like, those people are bad. And I'm like, no. There are people who were reacting from shame and running from themselves, and then started doing things that then if they started looking at without a structure, they were going to break. So then it kept building and building and building till they did do things that were horrifying. But I don't think, I know my mom held each of her children and wished with all her heart that to give them everything that she never had and to love us. And so then I think that generationally, when we do that there's a lot to be unpacked. There's a lot that just about that, facing like the things I have done is about unwinding shame as well, and consistently facing it without that wallow thing that we talked about in another episode. But I think we're also, like, I'm dealing with people that were enacting things that were huge, and that I kind of like, when I truly want to heal, I'm getting worried about talking about this because I don't want anyone to feel like they have to take the path I took. So when we start talking about trauma, I just want to say that that, I mean, number one is like, you know, is that everyone's path is their own. And I take, like, this is my path, and I'm not going to tell anybody else what they need to do.
Right.
So
it's important.
Yeah. So that with the dealing with shame, I think, when I could really see that, like, when they were enacting these, like, violence and trauma on me, when I start unpacking how I feel about it or how I've acted, it's actually, I feel like energetically I got their shame. I need to look at what they were dealing with their shame, and send that love as well, because it kept coming back until I did that. And I think that's getting off into a bigger topic, but that I think shame is this way, though, that what I think I went for it deeper because I spent years not actually dealing with this bigger picture of how shame is passed around.
Right.
And shame is is culturally acceptable in so many ways, and then innate in so much of our lives, and how we speak and how we engage with each other. And I believe energetically, and especially through DNA.
Yeah.
So
you can see it all the time coming out, and especially with my like, I catch myself like little subtle shame things with my son, just like, oh, you're doing like little subtle things, not heavy things, but those are just handed down from either what was told to me, what was told to my parents, it's like all that stuff. And I love how you're talking about going even into, because I've dabbled a little bit into my family history and some of the trauma that they've gone through. My mom, some stuff went down, and it's like, wow. And of course that's handed down, and it sounds like a little bit of the shame, it's tied into this forgiveness piece too, that you have some forgiveness around it.
yeah.
Just knowing that it's just some handed down shame, kind of unskilled behaviors.
Yeah, really unskilled.
Really unskilled. Yeah.
But I also think
Really unskilled.
that just to name it, I think that was a very beginning stage.
Name
and
the
if we're going to
shame?
give tools,
Name the shame,
is
or-
to just start to identify: is that shame or is that guilt?
Right.
Do
right.
how could I move this shame into regret? How can I? Oh, look, there I go, shaming myself again. There I go. I just shamed somebody else. I just looked at them and went, what they did makes them a bad person.
Right.
And then the shift in language for me, and I think people have kind of come up to me at our retreat and were saying that they noticed how I speak. And one thing is not saying but, another thing is that I try really hard not to put titles on people for behaviors. So I'll say, like, I don't say, they're a liar. I say they didn't tell the truth, or they are a perpetrator, or what's the other word for, not perpetrator, not pervert.
I know.
Predator.
Predator. Yeah.
To go, they acted in this way. They did this thing. Because when I can start doing that for others, and especially when I can start doing that for myself, I stop being that and I start being somebody who's whole, who has actions. And those actions are places that I can look at and go, that's unskillful.
So
like you keep saying unskillful, but
Yeah.
I am saying in the way that we speak. And for me, when I've done it, and when I ran the schools, we had a thing where we would direct people into not using titles, to say, like I'll use fuckhead, like that we're like these, like just as a sweet way of being like, oh, I was acting like a fuckhead, but it's still acting like a fuckhead, and not, you are an asshole, you are this thing, you are
acting like you're acting.
like,
yeah.
oh, you're experiencing this, you're acting as this, so that we can start looking at, these are actions that I can change. And these are and that it's not just who I am or who you are.
Do you think that, like, that core that you're talking about, like, we're all born innately good? Or do you think we're born, that core you're talking about, does that have a little bit of that handed down shame?
I think that, I'm a humanist in the sense of like, when you're like, we're good, and like the core of us, totally. I don't know if I'm right. I just know that I'm a better person when I believe that.
Yeah. And
so
same with me. Like I've said this, like, I feel like we're all, look at a baby. It's like, it's just like, if we're fed as a baby, changed, and you're not cranky for even need a nap, pretty fucking just content, just laying there. Just kind of.
I don't know. I've met some asshole babies.
Met some asshole babies.
Yeah, some of them are just little jerks.
Little babies like that. Yeah.
Are you talking newborns?
Newborns.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's just kind of. See, what happens is the conditioning.
Yeah.
As soon as they can kind of like see what's from early, how the fate, and it's super trippy. Like, we're even trying to scare kids, like with peekaboo kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the kids are laughing. The little babies just laughing. So there's that joy, that innocence that's in there, and it starts from conditioning, I think.
Yeah, I think that's I think we're good, and that conditioning, it like I said about it gets to our wholeness, but I also think we come in with innate trauma,
Some of that
innate
stuff. Okay.
shame
Yeah.
stuff.
Sure.
And I think, I mean, with my,
Sure.
I do have a belief system about that it's our job to turn that into love and forgiveness.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what we're,
Well,
that's what we're
yeah.
humans are
Well,
here for.
Yeah, there's that handed down trauma for sure. Like,
And trauma, what that is like, and shame.
yeah,
So-
generational traumas that
Yes.
with like people of color, how everything is just handed down. It's like, damn, it is in the in our DNA.
Yeah, everybody has it. It's
Yeah.
just some people, I think, have it more. Like I think of my family as that there's like ledges like that we just fractured in our DNA, and that's where like gargoyles sit, and that's
Yeah.
shame.
Shame.
It's like these like that we got fractured, and that it made space for evil to sit, and that it's my job to smooth
It's
that
like a
out.
gargoyle
That's
just
what I
standing
see.
up there.
And then I came in, and that it's kind of my, I mean, not that I take responsibility for anybody else, but it's like I don't want to deny that that's what I was working with. I think if I had been taken out of that family and put somewhere else, and I would still have it. I would still have I wouldn't have, maybe I would have had more skills earlier on, or not had so much more trauma enacted in this life, but no.
Yeah.
And that
Still the gargoyles at the cracks would still be there, kind of thing.
yeah, I would still be healing that.
Yeah.
I still would be working to figure it out. Yeah. And it still starts with just starting to address the basics, guilt, shame,
Yeah.
regret, taking responsibility.
Is this serving me? Is this serving me?
And am I becoming kinder?
It might be, yeah, because
That's
the shame is, I have to talk about it all the time in groups. It's like, what's the difference between guilt and shame?
Mm-hmm.
Guilt is acted unskillfully,
Yeah.
and shame is I am a bad person, or I did something bad, and I'm a bad I'm a
Yeah.
bad person, kind of thing.
Working with kids, and families, actually, with anybody, with those years that I was running those programs, inevitably it would come to this, that when somebody would start to actually begin the process of really healing, there would come this moment where they would be admitting something or asking a question, and the question was some form, but more often than not, with the kids, especially with the adults, they articulated it differently, but it would come to, I'm scared I'm just a fuck up.
Yeah.
I am, what if I'm just a fuck up? And that was I was like, every time it came to that, I was like, okay, they're willing to go there. And that was this undercurrent of like, I am just a fuck up.
Yeah.
And then when we could start to hold to where we go, okay, is it possible to just be a fuck up? Is it possible for a human being to just be a fuck up?
Yeah.
And once we could start there, and sometimes I would do work with people where I would say, all right, you're a fuck up. And then they go, okay. And I'd be like, really? And then we would do this like, okay, until they'd be like, I'm not a fuck up. I'm not a fuck up,
Yeah.
and then we would like get this like purge of like, say it louder. Like, I'm not a fuck up. Cause we just try to get that as a way to get it
Shake
out,
it out.
and to
Yeah.
really see it, to just go, fuck, it's impossible for me to just be a fuck up, or, like that doesn't hold the humanity. And with dealing with families, it would come to that of like, I mean, the shame that we put, the guilt, and we shame parents all the time. We blame them for everything, and they like, I think I did this. Like, my kid is messed up because of, and then we'd have to start to address that. And that you could see the worst parts were people running from that. That's what we're all trying to do. So I think just beginning in that phase too, of starting to look at other people and stop calling them fuck ups.
Yeah.
That doesn't hold humanity. And yeah, we can go to the extreme about serial killers and stuff, but I've looked at that stuff, and yeah, I don't want anybody roaming the streets free who wants to like cut off their mom's head and put it in the freezer. Absolutely not. Never, never, never. And yes, there's of course there's nuance to weird human beings and all our behavior, but it doesn't completely hold everything.
Yeah.
It just really doesn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't want to end on mom's heads and freezers, but there's just like stop going to the extreme about things stop using tools that are really good is what happens. I think when we talk about shame and healing and shit.
There's something in there.
Mm-hmm. I feel there's these voices in our heads that are often inexplicable. Like people did not treat me well as a kid, but they don't speak to me the way that this voice speaks to me.
Right.
So they never went that far.
Right.
This voice goes really far.
Yeah.
And it is like, I feel like shame is the devil. It is this thing that just will stop me in my tracks.
Shame is the devil.
You are a fuck up. You're a failure, and everyone knows it, and you'll never be anything, and you'll never. Not even
those thoughts come up, and it's the emotions, the feelings that are so tied to that shit.
Yeah.
It's like my whole being can be like, oh my God. You know?
So then I Care Bear stare that shit. I love that thing. Like, bless you, whatever voice this is. And then I envision the gargoyles and the DNA and all that shit.
Love it. So, question the shame.
Is it shame or is it guilt?
Is it shame or is it guilt? Can you lean on some healthy sense of regret?
Yeah.
And then when in doubt, shake it out.
Shake it.
Fucking Care Bear stare that
twerk
shit.
Twerk it.
Big ol' fucking yawn.
What?
Get fucking primal with this shit. Make it fucking move through you. Really, it's what I'm hearing. It's like, question it, sit with it, be with it, really know it intimately. Is this fucking true? Is this story fucking true? That you are fucking broken.
And whose story could it be?
Whose story could it be?
That's
and keep questioning. And if you don't have the answer, fucking move.
Twerk it out. If you don't have the answer, shake it. Shake it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Good.
Cool.
Well, that's another very weird episode of the Spiritual as Fuck. I think
if
this
you
might
only
be
would have known
whatever.
how we went into that episode too, it was just fuck. I couldn't stop laughing for a minute because Roxanne's so funny.
No. Do you want to say what it was, Joe?
If you want to shame
Joe
me like that.
Joe was laughing, and then he felt his butthole push against the couch, and then the more he laughed, the more it would push against the couch.
And then what happened to you?
I started paying attention to my kaka chakra hitting the couch.
Kaka chakra was just fucking in full effect.
And then we tried to have a serious discussion about
how'd we
shame.
do?
Hopefully we did something
it's
good.
all about pendulating, come in and out.
Are we talking about your butthole again?
Totally pendulating right now.
All right. Now let's segue into Jeremy Miller, our good friend.
Thank you, Jeremy, for editing everything.
Jeremy can decide if this stays in this episode. Check him out at the Betterment Bros and Flicks and Six. Also, rate and review, subscribe, please.
5-star.
Seriously, I mean, it's so good to get emails and stuff, but sharing the love helps. So put it out there.
Please,
also help spread the word. Put it on your social media. Say something about Joe's kaka chakra. Not mine.
Not Roxanne's.
No.
Please say something about Roxanne's.
No.
Okay.
Oh, and then, hey, have we talked about Luke lately?
We haven't.
Luke.
My little brother, Luke.
Little Luke Clements. He is a graphic designer, and he created our logo.
Yeah.
The incredible...
Spiritual Toast. Spiritual Mr. Toast.
It's the Oracle.
It's the
Mr.
Oracle,
Toastface, the Oracle.
And he's working on a bunch of other things he's excited to show us too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he's like, I love it. I love what you're doing.
Where
he's
can we
super
find
supportive.
Luke?
Lucalyptus.
I think he changed it to Luke Clements, though.
Did he? He has 2 of them.
Oh, okay. I might have tagged him wrong. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, put it in the show notes. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else you want to thank? We just said thanks to Poopery for the flow.
Yes.
You are awesome.
Being on the flow team.
On the flow team.
And then also our patrons, the people that are making this possible, are subscribing to giving monthly, and they are making this possible. So thank you so much, our patrons. We love you a lot, a lot.
And there's I'm doing a month long meditation series too, so go check it out on Patreon. So it's offering, like, what you all are doing is opening up so we can do even more. So
Yes.
really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
When you're feeling shit out of luck, remember you're spiritual as fuck. Or whatever.